Hey guys, so I'm doing a review for T. Kingfisher's The Twisted Ones. So I've really enjoyed her stuff in the past, but it's all been romance. But I knew that she wrote in other genres, so I was kind of interested to see what she would do with something else. So this is supposed to be horror. I found it to be more urban fantasy creepy. There's It's just more atmospheric than it is like what most people would think classic horror would be. So maybe paranormal. But anyway, so this lady's grandmother dies, and the grandmother was a fucking bitch. Like, she was abusive, she was terrible. Nobody liked her because she was just awful to everybody. Like, she would call you if your dog died and like make fun of you, kind of like awful. So when she dies, she leaves this house to the main character and her father. And so the dad's like, hey, it's kind of messy, just be aware of that. But when she gets there, it's like this trashed horror show. And so she's like, oh fuck. And so I used to work in elder care, right? So I've seen this, and I try and warn kids, respectfully, about how awful their parents' house might be, and sometimes you just don't know. So until you see it. So I related to this book on a lot of levels. It was kind of nostalgic for me. The things that she found throughout the house, the memories she had as a child, reminded me a lot of my grandparents. So her grandmother just died at 104, and that's basically the age range that my grandparents would be if they were still around. They died, the earliest death was 10 years ago. Oh my god. No, like 13. But so I had a lot of nostalgia with this. There was a lot of just elements that I had as a kid that kind of made this book, as a personal note, stand out. Your mileage will very much vary with that. So anyway, she was going through all of her grandmother's stuff, and she finds this journal from her step-grandfather. And like, she finds out just how abusive her grandmother was being. Like, she's hiding this guy's stuff. She's like not letting him sleep. So he's like sleeping out in the woods because she won't let him sleep. Like, she's just psychotic, and like, she's having these regrets that maybe she should have called like Adult Protective Services, and yes, you should have, but she just didn't know how bad it was. So anyway, in the journal, like, he starts to go a little crazy, or something really crazy is happening in the woods. Like, he's starting to talk about the twisted ones, and that he's going to twist himself around like the twisted ones. Like, he's talking about his body, like morphing his body and twisting it around to be like the twisted ones, and just talking about like all this creepy stuff that just doesn't make any sense. But she's like, okay, whatever. She's more interested in it as like a dementia thing. Like, and people do become paranoid. They do make up things that just aren't there. So it's possible, but like, it's also just really creepy. So I don't remember why exactly she was in the woods, maybe just walking her dog. But so she has a dog named Bongo, which is a highlight for me in the book. I always love animals. And so Bongo and her are walking in the woods, and she finds herself on top of like this really tall hill slash mountain, like, and she's like, what? Because it's not supposed to be there, right? She's somewhat familiar with the area, not totally familiar, but familiar enough that she knows that it's not supposed to be there, and is pretty confused by it. But she keeps rationalizing it, saying, this area is complicated. I don't know everything about this area, and when I get back, people are going to be like, oh yeah, that's like Moonshine Mountain. Like, didn't you know that's Moonshine Mountain, and you're just, city slicker. So anyway, she gets back, and she keeps trying to rationalize it, even though there's not a whole lot to rationalize. Like, she knows that she was up on a mountaintop that shouldn't exist. And so eventually she has to go back into those woods because she loses her dog Bongo. And that's basically where I'm going to leave off with the plot. So there are some secondary characters that I found endearing here. Foxy takes on a bigger role as the thing progresses. And I used to watch a whole lot of horror movies. I don't really anymore. So I don't know if this trope is like prevalent anymore, but like the old lady, like in her 60s to 80s, who smokes a lot and just is really flamboyant, like really loud clothing and loud behavior, and is like ultimately a badass. Like ultimately, you can rely on them when shit goes down. And so there's that, and her name is Foxy, and I found her endearing. And she takes on a bigger role as things go down because she's aware of the hill that she's speaking of, and the twisted ones. And so anyway, I enjoyed this. I found it to be more atmospheric and creepy. It's not really a shock horror or a gory kind of thing. It's almost charming. The main character is just very endearing, and you want her success. And maybe this is just my colored view because I came into her from her romance books, but I just found this almost to be a charming horror, if that's even a thing. Um, I do recommend it. It's not going to be for people who want like blood and guts and horror and monsters and viscera and things like that. It's going to be more for paranormal people who want a really creepy, like, not a ghost story, but a creepy monster in the woods horror story out in the Appalachia. So I do recommend this. I'm getting better with keeping these closer to 5 minutes than 10. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.